Hello everyone, this is part 53 of What If Naruto and Hinata trained together and a spark happened, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. The 9 allies raced forward. Hinata was at the lead, her Byakugan showing her the precise location of the Grass Warriors and the Shizokus. The returning locals were shifting position to meet Pain's reinforcements, indicating they had either received Iruka's message, or had noticed the Shizokus themselves. Hinata could see some uncomfortable shifting, especially among the Grass Daimyo samurais. She focused on the Shizokus again, wishing her Byakugan could pierce the stealth jutsu woven into their uniforms. At this distance, they looked like black, humanoid blobs. She could not even be certain that they were Shizokus, but she did not think any other village or country would be sending a force of 50 warriors with advanced concealment clothing to the hidden grass village. Then, she noticed something else. A single woman, hanging back behind the Shizokus, not in a stealth uniform. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with back-length, shining, jet-black hair. Her face was rounded without being plump, and very attractive. She was about 4 inches taller than Hinata, and had a slightly larger bust than the leaf kunoiki and slightly smaller hips. The woman wore a blue, fitted blouse, and black slacks, both tailored to display her figure and heavily armored despite their mundane appearance. Her intense amber eyes were facing the hidden grass village with a deep melancholy. Kohaku Zoshin, a voice announced as a young man darted out of the room, grinning. The 13-year-old girl stood, and entered the office. She let the tarp fall shut behind her and bowed, before sitting down at the table. Opposite her sat leader and 2 other hidden grass jonin. All 3 looked down at the reports in front of them without acknowledging the girl. Finally leader glanced at the entry in annoyance, and called out again, Kohaku Zoshin. I am right here, sir, the genin said simply, betraying no anger or surprise, only a slight resignation. After all, she was used to it. To call Kohaku Zoshin unassuming would have been an understatement. She was not tall, nor was she short. Her build was average. The last truly fit her best, for her ability to be missed seemed to go beyond her almost strangely average appearance. The 6th of 8 children, Kohaku had 3 brothers and 4 sisters. In such a large family, it was not surprising that a child might be overlooked from time to time. But this honor fell on Kohaku twice as often as all 7 of her other siblings, combined. Her parents never forget she existed, but if they were to start a meal or leave for a trip, assuming incorrectly that everyone was present, Kohaku would be the one they missed. When she had still attended a regular school, before beginning her shinobi apprenticeship, she was never called on, even when she was the only one to raise her hand. And even her jonin squad leader had started missions without her, or left her behind, at least in the beginning. Kohaku had noticed he had quickly gotten into the habit of counting how many of his students were present before doing anything. So you are? Leader blinked in amazement, and then tried to hide his annoyed embarrassment at missing her in trance. You were so quiet, we did not notice you. Well done, if unnecessary. But, leaving that aside, we are here to discuss the Chunin exam. Yes, sir, she agreed, allowing a slight hope to creep into her quiet, unremarkable voice. Your team passed the first 2 tests easily, he stated, looking over the paperwork, but our notes on the tournament seem to be incomplete. You did compete, did you not? Yes, sir, she confirmed. And how did you do? I made it to the semi-finals, she said humbly, but I was defeated by Minato Namikaze. That was you. He studied her features, but no recollection entered his eyes. He shrugged, I suppose it was. That boy was magnificent. To think he would be able to fight for 90 minutes like that, use all of those jutsus, and still be able to fight in the finals immediately afterwards. He will be a force to be reckoned with. I wish he was one of mine, he'll be wasted on Sarutobi. Yes, sir, Kohaku agreed softly. She had known within the first 10 minutes that she could not defeat the younger genin, but she had pulled out all the stops to stay in the battle, and show what she could do. In contrast, the stone ninja who fought Namikaze in the last match had been knocked out in under 30 seconds. She glanced at her commander, who was still gushing over the leaf warrior, and she sighed. Leader seemed to hear her exhale, at least in passing, and turned his attention back to her. Well, Kohaku, your skills, at least, are oddly impressive, he told her. The number of E, D, and C rank ninjutsu and genjutsu you know is phenomenal, especially considering your age and rank. And your taijutsu and weapons skills are much the same. But you do not know that many B rank techniques, and almost no A ranks. And none of your high-level skills are particularly noteworthy, mostly common, utility techniques. That, combined with your uninspiring performance in the Chunin exam, makes me feel you are not ready for promotion. Do either of you have any objections? Neither of the other Jonin spoke, and Leader smiled at her condescendingly. Maybe next time. Yes, sir, Kohaku nodded, and left the room as silently as she had entered. Hinata was surprised to find an unconcealed person so close to the advancing Shizokus. The Byakugan user wondered if the woman was some sort of spy or scout, except she did not appear to be watching the renegades, or even trying to conceal herself from them. After signaling to Iruka that she was going to investigate, the Hyuga heiress broke off, aiming her approach so she could run past the woman and then sneak back from behind. If it had not been for her Byakugan, the Leaf Tokujo could have mistaken the beauty's clothing for something a model or high-ranking executive might have worn in one of the larger and more modern cities. But Hinata's bloodline eyes were able to detect the extra thickness in the high-quality silk, and the mesh of metal wires woven into the fabric. Up close the woman was even more stunning. She wore no makeup, however Hinata could not think of any cosmetics that would improve her appearance. Though the Leaf Tokujo did not generally compare her looks with other women or worry too much about what anyone besides Naruto thought of her appearance, she could not help but feel a twinge of jealousy as she observed the mystery beauty. You might as well come out, Hyuga-san, the woman's voice seemed out of place. Hinata expected rich syllables, dripping with S, or the melodic tones of a master singer. Instead, the unknown Kunoichi's voice was almost dull. I might not be able to match your eyes, or a fox's nose, the beauty continued, her bland voice almost straining, but my vision and smell are well above average, and I caught you as you approached. It was then that the white-eyed girl recognized it. The woman had a pale, bland, blue-gray aura, the kind the teen associated with the rare individual who had no natural chakra elemental affinity. There was a slight haze of green in the tenketsu in the woman's head, possibly indicating a minor personal preference for yang chakra techniques. But Hinata had also seen that there was a dense concentration of chakra around her target's heart, mostly the same blue-gray, but with a hint of purple. It had confused the younger woman, and she initially dismissed it as some sort of jutsu the mysterious beauty was maintaining. When the other woman mentioned the fox demon, it clicked for Hinata. You are the Jinchuriki of the Six Tails Chameleon Demon, the Hyuga heiress stated nervously, stepping out of the tall grasses. You are Kohaku Namikaze. Kohaku, come in, Leader offered openly. The Jonin took the offer graciously, though the fact that he had both summoned her, alone, and had recognized her arrival put the nearly invisible Kunoichi on edge. Now approaching her 20th birthday, the years had been neither cruel nor kind to the young woman. She had grown, but only enough to stay of average height for her age and gender. Her face was still forgettable, her figure unremarkable. But that was not to say that she had not changed. The acceptance of her lack of notability had vanished in her late teens, leaving a subtly sarcastic youth, though few seemed to recognize the sharp edge that frequented her words. And her anger at her own lack of distinguishing qualities had not prevented her from using her ability to blend into excel at stealth missions. At her second Chunin exam, Kohaku had made it to the final match, only to lose to a sand ninja. She had been passed over for promotion again, so she worked even harder, expanding her repertoire and mastering some of her shakier combat styles. In her third Chunin exam, she breezed into the third round with a single partner, and then won the whole tournament. Combined with a skill sheet worthy of a Jonin, and a mission record stronger than half of the other grass ninjas, her victory forced Leader to acknowledge that she was ready to be a Chunin. But she had not held that rank long. During the next Jonin trials, she was promoted to Master. To do so, she gave each proctor a notepad and begged them to take copious notes. Though 4 of her 5 testers still did not recall her face, their handwritten reports could not be denied. What can I do for you, sir? She asked carefully. He took a deep breath, as if uncertain how or if he should proceed. Then he pushed the air out and started talking. As you may know, we captured the Six Tails Bayou 2 months ago, he told her. Yes, sir, she could not keep the bite out of her words. She had been one of the shinobi anchoring the Seven Virtues seal. In order to improve our standing among the hidden villages, we have been attempting to bond the demon to a host. To create a Jinchuriki. Her eyes widened slightly and she did not respond. This was news to her, and she was surprised by it. Jinchuriki were a double-edged sword, prized as weapons but hated for the demons within them. And the conclave of shadows carefully monitored the sealing of spirits in humans, she expected to prevent an imbalance of power. Unfortunately, he continued without noticing her reaction, our first few attempts have been less than successful. Fear crossed her eyes. You want me to be the next one to try to host the demon, she deduced. Yes, he said sadly, though she could tell it was an act, there appear to some points of similarity between your chakra and the chameleon's. We believe you can safely contain the monster, and hopefully even draw on its power. And if it fails and you die too, no one will notice, he thought. She remained silent, fighting the urge to run. This is a great honor, he offered, and if this succeeds, I suspect no one will overlook you ever again. They will be too afraid to, she whispered. What? He asked genuinely. I'm not sure I am worthy, she lied at normal volume. Kohaku, you are a Jonin of the Hidden Grass Village. His pause told her he had to think for a moment to remember her rank. I know you can do this. Thank you, sir. I will do my best, she agreed, her voice resigned. Kohaku understood that she had no choice in the matter. Excellent, he smirked happily. Now, the elders will be teaching you what you will need to know for the transfer. What have we here? The giant reptile hissed mockingly. A new toy for me. Yes, yes. Kohaku cut off the demon, glancing around at the mental construct. You're the big nasty Bayu. You're going to break the seal. You're going to eat my soul. Can we just get on with it? The demon paused and observed the girl. He was not a stranger to human hosts, especially after the last few weeks. He had seen all kinds of reactions. He had been threatened, sometimes honestly and others times in bluff. He had seen begging and pleading. He had watched mortals break down sobbing in primal terror. Some even tried to bargain with him. And it was not that he had not seen resignation before. But generally it was either accompanied by fear, or it was an attempt to trick the demon. The monster sensed neither of them here. She was not afraid of him, and whether she lived or she died, she really did not care. You want me to kill you? He was flummoxed. He had heard of humans with a death wish, but to the immortal animal, this was inconceivable. He watched her carefully, for any hint of a deception. It doesn't matter, she shrugged, I am being given to you as a sacrifice. My commander expects me to die. He hopes that when you destroy me, he will learn how better to contain you. He knows that no one will miss me, bland, boring, forgettable Kohaku. And if somehow you cannot break free, my life will still be over. So few people even recognize me now, and if I become a Jinchuriki, those who do know me will likely hate and fear me, or attempt to control me. The demon looked at the girl for the first time. Though it was no expert on human looks, it could somehow understand that her appearance was unremarkable. Similarly, and of greater interest to the spirit, the kunoiki's chakra was strong, but possessed no elemental structure. But she was fit, and from what he could see of her shielded mind, was quick-witted and knowledgeable. A dark plot began to form in the monster's psyche. If you hate your life, the demon broached slowly, trying to sound interested, why don't you change it? Dress brightly, act crazy, so they will be forced to recognize you. Or, even better, you are a ninja, you should be able to change your shape. I still have to be me, live with the choices I make, she answered softly, even if I transform, other ninjas will be able to tell, and I will run out of chakra and change back eventually. Besides, I never hated my life. There are even some advantages to being all but invisible. It's just sometimes, I wish I could live my life as someone else. To know what it is like to have a boy stare at me in lust, or even revulsion. The demon thought the human was contradicting herself, but chose not to challenge her. What if you could? He asked, his voice dripping with insinuation. Could what? Be someone else, but still be you. Change, without ninjutsu. How? She could not keep the curiosity from her voice. I am a chameleon, he pointed out, I could extend my changing powers to you. So I could change my skin color to camouflage myself. She frowned dubiously. How would that make me more noticeable? A common misconception. It waved a claw-like foot at her. My mundane cousins also change color to attract mates and to scare off predators. And I am also a Bayou. The transformation power I offer is far more comprehensive than a simple altering of pigmentation. How much more? She bit. The last Jinchuriki who had my power, the Bayou masked its hatred of the man who had died over 2 centuries ago. He could change his height, his weight, his face, almost anything. He was still bound by the limits of the human form, and he couldn't swap his gender either. But other than that, he could take on any appearance he could imagine. His shapeshifting was instantaneous and indefinite, and did not require any jutsu or even chakra. His transformations were so complete, even the 100 Eyes Argus could not detect them. And what do you want from me in return? Though tempted, she was not stupid. Your body. My body. The young woman turned red as she looked down at her unimpressive figure, and hid behind her arms. Not like that, the lizard sounded offended. I'm not the kitsune, after all. I just want to borrow your form from time to time. You see, they're a thing about your kind that fascinate me, but, unlike the vixen, I am not in a position to experience them. When? She asked carefully. How much? Say 1 day each month. The demon offered amiably. Is that fair? And you will promise not to hurt anyone I care for during these days. Or do anything to my body I would disapprove of. I suppose, so long as anyone you don't know or don't like is fair game. She knew better. The demon was ancient, even older than the current 7 and 8 tails, or so the elders had told her. Like all the Bayou, it was a demon of the highest rank and power, an animal suffused with human intelligence and godlike chakra. And it was certainly not to be trusted. Fine, she nodded. On those terms we have a deal. I see Conan has been telling tales. The elder woman smiled sadly. I told him she would. Why aren't you with your men? Hinata slid into a fighting stance. Were you planning to sneak into Ayameko's forces? To spy on them or sabotage them? No. The grass Jonan shook her head in amusement as she lifted her own arms into position. I just drifted away, caught up in nostalgia. I'm not here to fight, I just was bringing Pain the reinforcements as a cover, so I could talk to him away from Guki. Why? Are you plotting something behind Guki's back? No, I could never betray Guki, and I doubt Nagato would either, Kohaku said wistfully. I just wanted to talk to Nagato about my husband and Conan, and I thought it might be embarrassing for those stubborn men if Guki overheard us. Listen to me, telling you this, the missing nin chuckled, a greater hint of warmth in her flat voice. Strange, isn't it? I guess I just feel a connection with you. What do you mean? Hinata demanded, nervous and slightly upset. We were both overlooked when we were young, but blossomed into incredible women, the malleable beauty answered fondly, and we are both women who fell in love with the Namikas. That is, if Naruto really is Minato's son, like Guki believes. Hinata did not rise to the bait, but instead carefully controlled her reaction, one of incredulous surprise. Kohaku studied her and then shrugged. Either you really didn't know, you don't believe me, or you are a better poker player than I am, the Jinchuriki conceded, but then, in a clan of people with those eyes, you would almost have to be, wouldn't you? Hinata circled carefully around, so that Kohaku's primary avenues for retreat were towards the Shizokus, or towards the village. But the Byakugan user did not make the first move. She watched the Jonin carefully and waited. I suppose this means you won't just let me go? The spirit vessel asked, and the younger woman shook her head no. I can't do that. I understand. Kohaku sounded almost regretful, as she launched a kick at the teen's neck. Iruka, Temari, cut a path for Choi, Anko ordered. Big guy, hit him with your human avalanche. Ino and Shika, grab anyone that gets close to us. Girl. Matsuri. The sand youth insisted petulantly. Self-important girl number 2, Anko labeled her, while smirking at Ino. You'll help me guard our mid and long-ranged attackers. The Kazekige's apprentice frowned angrily, but she nodded. Sakura, Anko told the last Kunoiki gravely, you're our main event. Your job is to snipe any red or gray Shizokus you get a shot at, okay? Do you think we can really take on so many? Matsuri asked as she closed ranks with her temporary leader. Don't have to, Anko replied happily, we just have to take half, and hope the grass ninjas are at least competent enough to handle the rest. Besides, we have a few more tricks up our sleeves, in case things get hairy. Matsuri nodded, and a moment later a bowstring snap brought the Shizoku's attention to the allies. Not yet, maggot, the serpent summoner hissed angrily. Sorry, I had 2 blues and a red lined up, the medic archer explained. Anko looked around at the others in exasperation. Aruka and her students were all staring at her expectantly, and the delay led the 2 Sand Kunoiki to wait as well. What are you waiting for? She ordered, annoyed. Do it. Fuyuten, Wind Scythe Jutsu. Raiten, Lightning Pressure Jutsu. As the 2 ranged techniques shot across the field, the hefty Tokujo was already humming loudly. He rolled up into a half-dozen giant spheres and barreled forward behind the 2 attack jutsus. The Kunoiki breezed into her commander's office. Her long black hair shimmered behind her in elegant waves. Her Jonin vest was strained across her impressive chest, but was slightly loose around her narrow waist. Her bright, amber eyes practically glowed with cautious amusement. Kohaku-san, leader greeted her with barely concealed annoyance. Thank you for coming. What can I do for you, sir? Though her unassuming voice had not changed with her appearance, there was a smug happiness in her speech. It is what you can stop doing, he said sternly. Stop changing your appearance, and stop seducing every man in this village. She glared at him, but there was more amusement than anger in her gaze. That's a gross exaggeration. I've flirted with maybe 10 guys, and I haven't slept with anyone. But the men you chose are from powerful families, he countered. A coincidence, she stated, her confidence slipping. And none of them appreciate being toyed with by a Jinchuriki, he ignored her. She closed her eyes, and a moment later a sardonic smirk crossed her plump lips. You will stop, he ordered, taking her grin for her answer. You think so? She shot back. He frowned, shock at her refusal overshadowing his rage. What happened to you? He asked. You used to be a loyal ninja. Is this the demon's influence? How would you know what I used to be? She snapped. You never noticed me, no one did. And you know full well that the elders and I fixed the seals you used to bind the demon inside of me. The chameleon is now properly sealed, giving me its power without its influence. She and the 3 ancient Jonin had researched the fuinjutsu used on the other hosts of the tailed beasts, and had applied new seals over her heart. The 6 tails was now in a glass cage on a desk in her mind, like a pet. The creature raged frequently, as she had suspected it had its own plans to betray her, and was none too happy to be double-crossed first. And sometimes its power could leak through the wire mesh on top of the cage and fill her with rage, but she knew she had better control over her demon than the other Beiyu Jinchuriki she had learned about, except perhaps the ninja currently containing the 2 tails cat. And I am still a loyal ninja. Her anger changed to hurt and disappointment. I take every mission without question, even the ones that are supposed to kill me. And I have one of the best success ratios in the village. And yet all of your seduction missions have been completed with genjutsu or drugs instead, he growled, not happy being lectured by his junior. Or did you think we did not notice that? I still completed those missions within their parameters, she justified darkly. I'm not a member of the Crimson Corps. And that is why it has been overlooked. Until now, he forced himself to calm down. But if you keep using your powers against the people of this village, we will be forced to take punitive and preventative measures. What? For flirting with the guys? For using your powers to deceive your fellow shinobi and other citizens of the Kasagakure? Leader narrowed his eyes. Will you agree to keep your current form whenever you are in the village? Kohaku hesitated. The attention was still new to her, and not unwelcome. But her current, default, appearance, an upgrade to her natural form, was known to everyone in the shinobi town. And while the anger and fear were moderately better than being ignored, they could never compare to the admiration she received when she became a willowy blonde or a busty redhead. I thought not, he stated before she had a chance to fully gather her thoughts and respond. He snapped his fingers and 3 other Jonin darted in. Kohaku realized once again she was not really being offered a choice, that the meeting and the request were a formality, probably to appease the few allies she had. Hold her, he barked. The other 3 shinobi slammed her over the desk, pinning her arms down and holding her head steady. Thanks to the demon, she had wider than normal field of vision, so she was still able to see leader take out the pentagonal branding iron. This seal will allow us to track and identify you, regardless of what you choose to look like, he informed her, and I'm sorry to say, this will hurt. The pleasure in his voice denied his apology, and Kohaku tried to break free. But the jonin holding her arms put their superior weight onto her joints, and she could not escape. Desperate, she tried to call on the demon's power, but man holding her head slapped a paper seal on her brow, disrupting both her chakra and concentration. Leader rounded his desk, sending his chakra into the jutsu-bonded iron. He pulled down her shirt, exposing her spine between her shoulder blades. He pressed the brand down, and Kohaku screamed. Hinata caught the rogue jonin's foot on Ginmaki, and pushed the other kunoiki away. You were very quick, Guki's wife noted, and flexible. Naruto must love that. Hinata turned bright red, but managed to avoid the knuckle strike aimed at her neck. I won't let you distract me. The pale teen's gentle voice was off balance and slightly angry. She reached out to tap Kohaku's shoulder, but the shapeshifter caught her wrist and flipped the younger kunoiki over her hip, slamming the Hyuga heiress heavily into the ground. I'm not trying to distract you. The Jinchuriki shook her head as the leaf Tokujo rolled back to her feet. I'm making conversation. With Conan gone, I don't have any women to talk to. Besides, I'm curious. I want to know just how much alike Naruto and Guki are. Or rather, might be. Rotation. Hinata shrieked slightly as she spun, but Kohaku flipped backwards, narrowly avoiding the heavenly spin. Naruto is nothing like Guki. The normally quiet young woman barked defensively. The Jinchuriki's eyes narrowed angrily, and she sighed, and shook her head with an ironic smirk. You don't know anything about Guki, Kohaku asserted kindly, only the biased versions others have offered you. Guki is a good man. He is loyal, kind, gentle when he can be and deadly when he has to be. A loyal man who betrayed his people. Hinata asked, rather than the sarcasm most people would have affected, she was genuine in her question, a good man who is trying to conquer the continent. A kind, gentle man who started a war that could cost tens of thousands of lives before it is done. You are young, Kohaku said sadly, you could hardly be expected to understand the depths of pain some of us have seen. Such as watching your mother murdered in front of you, by someone who wants to harvest your genes, probably in some horrific and painful way. Hinata countered darkly, throwing her fist at Kohaku's face. Being all but disowned by the rest of your family. As her fist was blocked, Hinata aimed her elbow at the Jinchuriki's ribs, and having your brother try to kill you for your father's actions. Watching as the man you love is mentally and socially tortured by almost everyone around him, for no good reason. The younger woman kicked out at the jonin's left knee, and being powerless to help him because he barely notices you, and chases someone else. Having to struggle for years to prove to anyone, even yourself, that you are not weak and useless. Hinata's second kick struck the grass renegade's navel, cutting off a single chakra point and driving the taller woman back. I think I am fairly well acquainted with pain, Kohaku-san, she concluded. I have worked hard for the happiness I have, and I have not betrayed anyone to get it. Pretty speech. The older beauty stopped her skid and returned to an upright stance, and I may have underestimated your past suffering. But what are you doing to spread what you have found to others? The young woman tripped, her short, thick, blue hair falling into her face, obscuring her vision. The pain between her shoulders was getting worse, and the last spike of agony had reached all the way down to her thighs, causing her stumble. She pulled herself up, breaking into a run again. She could hear them getting closer. She considered changing again, but she knew that wouldn't fool them. The brand would remain, visible to both their eyes and their jutsu. Kohaku's Oshin, a voice rang out before her, and the missing nin stopped, drawing herself up straight, focusing on ignoring the pain, though whether to bluff or to fight she had not yet decided. The 5 masked grass ninjas trailing her closed the gap, and spread out to surround her. 2 more stepped out from the area near the voice that had called her name. And then, last Hunter Nin appeared before her. Even if she hadn't recognized his voice, she knew his stance and his build. So leader sent you, sensei? The young woman asked sadly. Please, stand down, Kohaku, he requested, come back to the village with us. There could still be a place for you. No, there is no place for me there, she shook her head, and pointed her left thumb at her back. The second time that man chose to mark me was the last straw, it just took me some time to realize that. She took a firm breath, and met her teacher's eyes through the mask. No one there trusts me, and without trust, I can never be part of a team. I won't go back. He dropped his head sadly, and then raised his arm, and made a curt slashing motion. 3 of the hunters charged her, while the others started signing. Her former sensei stayed back, watching. The first one was too eager, and got ahead of his comrades. She recognized the scar on his right bicep. He was one of the Tokujo she had flirted with. She suspected he was looking for revenge on the Jinchuriki tease. But that was not going to happen. She caught his extended left fist with her right hand, and drove her left elbow into his trapped shoulder while pulling, dislocating the limb. She released him, and considered her options briefly. There were 7 ways she could KO him with her just bare hands, before the next melee attacker reached her. Instead she boxed his ears and then jumped up to kick his temple. He tumbled into the path of the second fastest taijutsu fighter, unconscious but alive. One of the ninjutsu users stopped signing, and darted forward to rescue the defeated shinobi. Her next opponent was both more skilled and more cautious. Unfortunately, Kohaku was again the superior martial artist, and within seconds her barrage of punches and licks was backing him towards the outer circle and away from the last melee combatant. Just as she was getting ready to knock him out, her vision went black, and the next instant brand between her shoulders flared again, stronger than before. She spun away from her opponent, relying on her ears and nose, but still one of their fists or heels clipped her side. She brought her hands together. Release, she intoned harshly, and the veil on her vision faded, but only briefly. The maiden decided 2 of the jutsu users must have used the illusion in tandem, leaving the third to slow her down by activating the brand, while the fourth tended to their fallen comrade. Then a foot hit her ankle, and she fell to one knee. She heard and felt the net drop over her, and started to reach for the demon's power. Before she could, another jutsu hit her, leaving her weak and unable to focus. The rope mesh started to tighten around her, and she tried to draw a blade before her arms were trapped. Someone stomped on her wrist, breaking it. That was unnecessary, her former teacher said angrily. I quite agree, an unfamiliar voice stated. Who are you? She heard another of the grass hunters demand. Then she heard a sharp crack, and the pain between her shoulders vanished. She tried again to break free, but with her right arm disabled and the net pulling tighter, she could not. Kaiten, curling flames jutsu, one of her former allies shouted, and then there was another crash and part of the net went slack. She kicked out towards where the ropes were still taut. She heard a grunt of pain, and a return kick grazed her ribs, but was too weak and off balance to hurt her. There was a thump next to her, and the shadow over her eyes faded for a moment, but ultimately held. A moment later, the rest of the net loosened, and she rolled free. Stay still, the unknown ninja whispered into her ear, and she shivered. She complied, focusing her chakra on her wrist. She knew almost nothing about healing jutsu, but she could dull the pain and hold the bones in the proper position. The sounds of battle rang out around her, and a moment later her sight returned. She saw her mentor facing another shinobi, a tall, well-built man with short auburn hair. But her rescuer was facing away from her, so she could not see his face. Who are you? Her sensei asked again, but this time nervously. The stranger darted forward, and after a quick exchange of taijutsu, her mentor fell, too. Kohaku was amazed. Though she knew she had surpassed her teacher, she did not think she could have taken him down so quickly. Her heart fluttered. Her mystery savior turned and his sharp blue eyes locked on her. She thought he looked somewhat familiar, but could not find his face in her memories. We should get some distance between us, before they recover, he told her, taking her uninjured hand, drawing her to her feet. It was then that she noticed the grass hunters were all still breathing. He pulled her gently and they vanished into the woods. You didn't KO them, she said suddenly, as he started healing her wrist. I don't care if I don't have to, he said simply, and I find it more interesting that you didn't KO them. You could have taken down the first 2 much faster if you had used lethal techniques. That would have opened you up to reach the first genjutsu user, and then you could have broken free. You are a missing nin. Not by choice, she interrupted, I might KO those who forced me to turn traitor, but I hold no ill will for most of my former comrades. He nodded, and then she sighed, reaching back to rub that sore spot on her upper spine. He released her arm, and she recognized that the ache in her wrist was gone. And just escaping wouldn't have helped, they still could have tracked me, she explained. She undid her shirt, and his eyes narrowed. She smirked slightly, but then turned to show him the mark on her. A prisoner's brand, she told him, as he leaned closer to gently probe the chakra burn. It lets them track me, and inflict pain on me, so I won't be able to fight back as well. And what did you do to earn this? He asked evenly, without accusing. All the while, his fingers rubbed the brand methodically, soothingly. It is a long story, she said sadly, but it basically comes down to two truly terrible crimes. I toyed with the wrong boys' hearts, and even worse, I repeatedly survived when I was not meant to. He pressed down hard, and it was like I spread out over her skin. Well, that won't be an issue anymore. She touched the spot again, and found the rough indentations she had grown accustomed to massaging were gone. First you saved me, and now this, she purred, a seductive tone in her bland voice. How can I possibly thank you? She let her open top slip lower, but he stood up and stepped away, chuckling. You think I'm funny? She frowned angrily at him. I think you are trying too hard, he offered kindly. What does that mean? I mean no offense, Zoshin-san, he held up his hands in supplication, but it seems like you are wearing a mask. You appear to me like a preteen genin who just learned to perform a transformation jutsu, and is now running around in the disguise of an adult, trying to act like something you aren't, trying to get something you wanted but couldn't get in your normal form. She looked down, and he blinked, surprised. I'm close. His tone was one of amusement and self-deprecation. I guess that puts me back over 50%, again. How did you know my name? She asked, trying to change the subject. The one you referred to as your sensei called you Kohaku Zoshin, he explained, letting her deflect him. So who are you? She prompted, securing her clothing. I'm just another missing nin. But you know my name. True enough, he inclined his head, I am Guki Namikaze. That is why you look familiar. Her voice lightened as everything fell into place. I fought a Minato Namikaze in the Chunin exam, many years ago. You look like him. You faced my brother. He studied her face more carefully, and she blushed slightly. Yes, it was the semi-final match. I managed to hold him off for more than an hour and a half, before he knocked me unconscious. That was an impressive fight, he agreed, his voice growing cold, but that was not you. Yes, it was, she insisted incredulously. I recall every moment of that battle, he said harshly, and while your fighting style is similar enough that it could have changed over the years, you do not have that girl's face. You remember what she looked like? Her breath caught as she said it. Of course. She was not sure why she did it. But she relaxed, releasing her demon-granted power for the first time in years. Her blue hair lengthened slightly and lost its luster as it darkened. Her pink eyes turned brown, and her feminine curves shrunk to almost nothing. Her chin, her cheeks, her nose, and the shape of her eyes all smoothed back into their original form. A second later, Kohaku Zoshin faced Guki Namikaze with the appearance she had been born with. His eyes widened slightly, and his stern expression softened. It was you, he affirmed. I am sorry I doubted you. That's all right, she said demurely, unaccustomed to being recognized like this. But the way you transformed. I have never seen a jutsu like that, he said, fascinated. It's not a jutsu, not exactly, she explained softly, changing again, but this time shifting back to her default disguise. It's something special I can do. If you don't want to talk about, you don't have to, he said, again correctly reading her. Thank you, she nodded, blushing slightly. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you Zoshin-san, but I should probably get going, he told her. I need to get back to my apprentices. He stood and turned to leave, and she jumped to her feet. Wait. He turned back to gaze at her, and she saw curiosity in his eyes, and it may have just been her imagination, but she also thought she detected a hint of hope. She cursed herself for stammering, and for the butterflies in her stomach. I am supposed to be the manhunter. She told herself. Maybe we could travel together for a while. She suggested nervously, you know, safety in numbers. They could come back. I would like that, he agreed. She ran forward to catch up with him. So, Namikaze-san, may I ask why you left the Leaf Village? It started after my third sensei betrayed my first. The Jinchuriki drew the katana and wakizashi that had been hidden in her slacks and hopped forward, swinging both blades. The heiress caught the swords together on one braca, but Kohaku was expecting that, and used her weight and leverage to push the smaller woman back. Then, While Hinata was off balance, the grass kunoichi dropped down and attempted to sweep her opponent's legs out from under her. Doton, Foundation Jutsu, Hinata exclaimed, snapping her hands together in the ox sign. A layer of earth surrounded her legs, and though Kohaku's kick cracked the hardened clay, it did not disrupt the Tokujo's footing. I start by not forcing my ideals on anyone and not robbing anyone of their free will, Hinata answered Kohaku's question firmly, then, I do what I can, for who I can. But you don't seek him out, do you? The elder kunoichi took advantage of her opponent's temporary immobility, angling one half of her dasho at each of the girl's knees. The blades cut into Hinata's legs, and in a puff of smoke Hinata was gone, a vaguely human-shaped figure crafted from the local grasses left in her place. Kohaku spun instantly, her katana extended. The Hyuga Tokujo was forced to block the sword with her right bracha even as she landed from the subsution. She curled her arm so her shoulder was behind Ginmaki, which let her use her weight to counter Kohaku's momentum. This freed her left hand to thrust at the Jinchuriki. 8 trigrams, empty palm, Hinata shouted, shooting the column of chakra at her counterpart. Kohaku brought up her wakizashi, and released her longer blade. She signed twice as she put her second hand on the short sword's hilt. Ninja art, jutsu splitter, she yelled back. The beam of force divided on Kohaku's weapon, and the Jinchuriki turned her body to narrow her profile. The still destructive halves of the bisected jutsu barely missed the grass renegade. But Hinata wasn't done. 8 trigrams, empty palm, she repeated, pulling back her left hand and snapping her right forward. The second empty palm was wider and denser, and the Hyuga Saiyan aimed this attack at Kohaku's pelvis and upper legs. The Byakugan technique hit, and the log that took the grass Jonan's place exploded into a mass of splinters. Unlike Kohaku, Hinata did not have to estimate where her opponent would reappear, her Kekkei Genkai letting her track the older woman's exact position during the subsution. So the teen lashed out with a heel kick, leading into an elbow strike. What good is searching for people who may or may not need my help, and might not even want it, Hinata responded, if it means I fail those around me, or worse, lose myself. Kohaku grunted lightly as she blocked the Tokujo's foot with a sweep of her wrist. She ducked under Hinata's elbow, dropping into a splits and hooking her katana's guard with her foot, and flicking it back to her hand as she tumbled away from Naruto's lover. Guki's wife rolled back to her feet, interposing her dasho before Hinata's fingertips, as the young woman tried to disable the chakra points in the currently taller kunoichi's left shoulder. All other thing being equal, a taijutsu user always has a disadvantage against a blade master, Kohaku pointed out evenly, having decided to abandon the philosophical debate. Hinata's answer was to send a pulse of chakra into Ginmaki, increasing the length and width of the coat by manifesting the lightning blades. Kohaku blinked in surprise. I guess Conan wasn't exaggerating, the flirty Jinchuriki noted, dodging Hinata's leading slash. The Jonin countered with a quick jab at the teen's head, but Hinata blocked with her left bracha, and Kohaku nearly dropped her wakizashi when the electrical chakra surged into her hand and up her arm. Ninja art, resistor jutsu, the sword user stated without signing, and her long blade intercepted Ginmaki's stab at her stomach. Even though she was able to deflect the coat's solid energy projection, the voltage was too strong for her off-the-cuff technique to fully stop, and her arm spasmed. Did your boyfriend really make those for you? The talkative combatant asked sincerely, skipping back out of range of the pale woman's scissor attack. He did, Hinata nodded proudly, nearly blocking another slash with her defensive weapons. Kohaku pulled her attack up short, rather than be shocked again. The taller kunoichi jumped back, sheathing her dasio and starting to form hand seals. Ninja art, blinding flare jutsu, she incanted. Brilliant light flashed out from her hands, and she landed prepared to leap forward. She stopped, however, when she noticed Hinata had followed her, unimpeded. Kohaku rolled back out of the way of Ginmaki's blades again. Nothing. She both pondered and asked, I would have thought with those eyes, it would have been more effective, not less. Hinata did not say anything, but continued to charge forward, both lightning extensions sweeping towards her opponent. Kohaku tried to fall back, but at the last instant. There is that, Kohaku said aloud to herself, and I have always wondered how well it would work against the Byakugan. The former grass Jonin placed her hands together, and began to circulate her chakra. An instant later, Hinata saw a new, powerful pulse emanating from second chakra pull in the woman's heart. No, Hinata whispered. Even though she had only seen it a few times, she had always been watching Naruto closely, so she recognized what was coming. She darted forward, her hands extended. 8 trigrams, she started to announce, but as she drew close, a burst of energy from Kohaku threw her back. As Hinata pushed herself back up on her elbows, she saw 3 tails of energy extended behind the Jinchuriki. Unlike Naruto's full, vulpine tails, these projections of blue energy were thin, whip-like, reptilian. Kohaku grinned, and there was a hint of additional sharpness to her teeth. The cloak of chakra around her was vaguely lizard-shaped and seemed to dull and blur the kunoiki's edges. Then the tails began to wrap around the jonin. Hinata's eyes widened in surprise and fear, as Guki's wife vanished completely. So, you remember me this time? Kisame taunted, swiping at Guy's head with his shark-skinned sword, his Akatsuki robes fluttering around him. The leaf jonin ducked under the feint, and blocked the mist renegade's follow-up kick with his right heel. Of course, Guy stated imperiously, twisting his body to drive his foot into the Jinchuriki's knee, I would never forget someone brazen enough to try to kidnap a comrade out of the Leaf Village. But I am unsure what you mean by this time, for this is only the second time we have ever met. Same had a dip to intercept the bowl-cut shinobi's leg, but Guy suddenly vanished, and reappeared on the other side of Kisame, throwing a punch at the demon vessel's left temple. Kisame took the blow, so he could bury his fist in the leaf soldier's gut. What about 2.5 years ago? Hoshigaki demanded, his annoyance fueling his constant, cold rage. You and your students fought me while you were trying to rescue the Kazekage from the Akatsuki. That was not you, Guy countered, sounding like he was lecturing a fool, though that person may have looked similar to you while we were fighting, he had neither your fearsome aura, nor your fishy aroma. Kisame's next slash went wide in surprise. I thought he was insulting me by pretending I wasn't worth remembering, the shark man pondered silently, or he was so brain damaged he really didn't remember. Could he actually have recognized that the body I was possessing was not really me? Any further contemplation was cut short as Guy's Manriki Gasari shot out and wrapped around the general's sword. However, this sword I recognize from that battle, the leaf soldier said darkly, feeling the chain rub against the scars on the palms of his hands, where the demon blade had forcefully unequipped itself from Guy. He pulled on the legendary blade, to keep Kisame off balance and unable to swing properly, and then launched the other weight of his weapon towards the mist shinobi's skull. Kisame intercepted the chain with his arm, forcing the metal mass to wrap around his limb instead of hitting his skull. He then sent a mental instruction to the semi-intelligent sword, and spikes, shaped like giant shark's teeth, tore out from under the cloth bindings, slicing through the links of Guy's weapon like they were flesh instead of hardened steel. Hoshigaki then brought Samehada down on the chain still holding his other arm, destroy it as well. The Jinchuriki flicked the broken weapon away, ignoring the pain in his wrist. The 7 tails did not give its host the regeneration that the 9 tails had Uzumaki, but it did accelerate his healing somewhat, and he sent extra chakra to his limb to hold the cracked bones in place and repair them quicker. I think my Samehada remembers you, too, Kisame shot back, slashing the still-fanged blade at his enemy's chest. Guy hopped back, drawing his nunchaku as he did. The shark man snorted in amusement, and swung again. But when Guy blocked with his flail, the thinner chain cordon wood held. The shark's tiny, black eyes flashed angrily. Surely you did not think I would make the same mistake twice in the same fight? Guy demanded, and then released his nunchaku with one hand, caused the shark's skin blade to fly past him from the extra force Kisame was putting on it. Lee's mentor spun the other end of his weapon back around, hitting the renegade in the back of the head. Unfortunately, Kisame was spared the worst of the impact thanks to his forward motion. He pivoted back, trying to stab the legendary sword into Guy's back, but the leaf jonin was also turning and deflected the blow into the ground with a hard strike from his whirling weapon. You have improved in the last 2 years, Kisame smirked mirthlessly, as he lifted his sword back into position. I'm simply not holding back this time. Guy managed to be humble and grandiose in same phrase, you are stronger than the imposter, and my students are not here, so I do not need to offer them a chance to test their strengths. The leaf ninja twirled his nunchaku once, then held it parallel to his chest in both hands. Does this mean you also are ready to battle in earnest? I guess so. Hoshigaki offered a shark-toothed grin, and reached for the clasp on his cloak. The Nodaki slid effortlessly free from the ice statue that had been her. Who is there? A dark, wispy voice issued from the sword's owner. It's no use hiding in the mist. I can still feel your heat. Bunjiro Egaru was noticeably taller than average, though not quite as tall as his current partner Kisame. His skin was so pale that it had almost a grayish hue. The renegade swordsman's hair was a light sky blue, with white streaks and tips, and was pulled into a ponytail that hung just past his neck. His build was sharp, a thin mass of tightly bound muscle under his icy skin. His eyes were white, and if not for the visible pupil, could have been mistaken for the Byakugan. The remainder of his face was handsome, but painfully cold, like it had been carved from a block of glacial ice by a master sculptor who was more concerned with making his work perfect than matching any realistic human. He wore a black sleeveless shirt and pants, with wave-patterned leather gloves and boots. She emerged from the fog slowly, not wanting to put herself in range of his weapon. The Suhi was nearly 7½ feet long from point to pommel, with 2/3 of that taken up by slender, wine-sharp blade. The metal was pure white, except for the slight darkening of the hamon line, shaped like a snow drift. The Nodaki's long handle was wrapped in a mesh of whitened leather and blue silk. The crosspiece was a basic oval, but was carved with dozens of individual snowflakes. Kaidi Mizuno, his eyes fluttered over to her immediately, the daughter of the man who drove me out. You rebelled, she countered angrily, you tried to kill the Mizukage because you did not like of his policies. I would have said that I sought to preserve the strength of the Mist Village, he shrugged, raising his blade, but such old arguments are pointless now. He slashed out, and despite her calculations, the 5-foot blade came within inches of her left hand. Her fingers curled and turned dark red, severely frostbitten by the near contact. Kaidi drew a kunai with her good hand, and hopped back, throwing the dagger at him. As he blocked the projectile, which shattered into dozens of icy pieces, she signed quickly, beginning to restore her damaged hand. Then she crafted another set of seals, and a sheath of hot, dry air surrounded her body, driving away the mist jutsu. The desert breeze may protect you from most Suten jutsu, he told her flatly, but it will not stop Sui's cold. He swiped with his blade again, and despite the increased distance, she felt the concentration of frigid chakra clash with her soft barrier. The air warped from the divergent temperatures, and she grinned. I never expected it to, she told him, ninja arts, mirage jutsu. She vanished into the spreading haze created by the clashing of the heat, the cold, and the mist. A set of 3 shurikens appeared flying at Bunjiro's left side, and then an instant later another trio of stars flew at his right. He knocked all 6 from the air with a single sweep of his extra-long blade. Tricks and illusions will not work on me, he informed her without boasting, and rotated Suhi around his head twice. A sphere of cold burst out from the Nodaki, turning the hidden mist jutsu in its range into snow, and neutralizing the pockets of warmth she had been generating. Kaidi became visible amidst the flurries, signing another attack. Ninja art, summoning jutsu, she finished quickly, and 2 polar bears burst into being. Get him, she said, and with matched roars, the bears charged. Bunjiro did not even react as the massive animals struck, their claws digging into his chest. But as their paws advanced, the bears passed through the swordsman without injuring or moving him. Though there is wisdom in choosing an Arctic animal, I already told you your genjutsu would not work on me, he stated as the bears faded from view. Are you sure about that? She countered, drawing a kunai with a paper bomb tied to the handle. She drew her hand back to throw the exploding knife, and he lashed out with his frigid blade. Kaidi tried to resist, but the cold washing over her was too powerful, and she began to freeze. Then Bunjiro suddenly took his left hand off Sui's hilt and snapped it sideways. His fist struck the real, hidden Kaidi's chin even as the frost-covered ninjutsu tag exploded, destroying the solidified water clone. The real face of the mist tumbled away from the force of his back fist, which fortunately put her out of range of a finishing strike from the legendary ice blade. Yes, he answered her question, or were you not aware that wielding Suhi robs the user of the ability to see light, and instead lets him see and feel heat and cold? Now that you mention it, I remember hearing a rumor about that. Now, should I finish you, or simply disable you so that we can use you against your father? He asked her honestly. You might be getting ahead of yourself, she stepped further back, starting to sign again. If I can hit him with enough fire or heat, she recalled the special training the Mist Hunters had been given to fight the broken swords, I can temporarily disrupt Sui's powers. And maybe blind him in the process. Then I might have a shot at him. Kaiten, Phoenix Stream Jutsu. She roared, thrusting her hands, her fingers splayed in the shape of a bird, her overlapping thumbs forming the head. A thick burst of orange flames, maintaining an avian profile, shot at the ice sword user. But he poured more ki into the Nodaki and stabbed into the middle of the fire technique. The phoenix stopped, and its color faded from orange to yellow, before it began to break apart at the edges. That technique may have worked for your father, Bunjiro informed her, but I have grown since then. And you are not your father. If you wish to take advantage of Sui's weakness, you will need a much stronger fire release technique. Illusion art, encroaching allies jutsu, she ignored him, and signed another art instead. His eyes narrowed, and he watched her dubiously. How many times must I illustrate that your genjutsu are powerless against me? He queried her, raising his sword in front of his eyes. One more would be nice, she smirked, now that I know which of your senses to target, and how. His head shifted to the side, and his eyes widened in surprise. 3 human-shaped sources of heat were moving cautiously closer. You have managed to create a false heat source for me, he sounded mildly impressed, but if I am aware the illusion is an illusion, what good does it do you? Now, I think I will begin by freezing your legs. I can always K you later. DYMANIC entry. Rock Lee's right foot slammed into Bunjiro's right shoulder, pushing Suhi wide and staggering its master. Lee landed with a grimace, and then hopped back, favoring his left leg. My, that is cold, Lee grimaced against the pain. What is this? Bunjiro jumped away from Neji and Tenten's joint kunai barrage. Not all illusions are crafted from chakra, the face of the mist noted smugly, as she regained her feet. The Akatsuki cloak wrapped around Guy, trying to crush him. The strangulation jutsu was meant to be defensive, to prevent the robe from being stolen and used to infiltrate Madara's group. But the shark had suspected it could also be used as an offensive move, if the Akatsuki member was willing to give up the protection the reinforced fabric offered. Get off me, you accursed dress, Guy growled, tearing apart the silk and throwing the 2 halves onto the ground. He barely dodged Kisam's strike while his eyes were covered, but one of Samehada's teeth grazed the leaf ninja's right arm. The demonic weapon latched onto the nearest tenketsu, and forcibly tore out a small chunk of Guy's energy. The leaf jonin grimaced from the unexpected pain of the shallow cut, but managed to sweep his nunchaku at Kisam's chest, preventing the Shizoku's general from capitalizing. You didn't know about my Samehada's power to steal chakra. The Jinchuriki taunted, patting the hilt of the legendary sword. The shark skin blade hummed happily. It must have escaped my notice, Guy said darkly. Of course it did, Hoshigaki agreed dubiously, it's only so famous that Guki Namikaze patented his siphon's power after it. I do not listen to rumors, Guy shrugged. That's too bad. Kisam slashed again, and Guy once again diverted the attack into the ground with his flail, because, as I told you before, my sword has taken a liking to you. Or at least to your flavor. The shark swung overhand, and Guy noticed his opponent was moving faster. He blocked the strike with his nunchaku's chain, and was pushed back. You are increasing your strength, the bowl-cut shinobi noted, twisting his body to force the sword away, while also launching a side kick at the renegade's stomach. Kisam stepped back to minimize the impact, and took his left hand off Samehada to grab Guy's ankle. He completed his turn, and threw the leaf jonin towards the lake. Lee's mentor bounced off the dark sand, and his training forced him to send his chakra down, so he skipped across the surface once, and then landed on the water instead of sinking. Samehada wants more of your chakra, Kisam agreed as he charged after his enemy, so it is providing me some of the power it has stored. You speak as if it were alive, Guy pondered, attempting to stop Hoshigaki with a leg sweep. Despite his size, the Jinchuriki hopped nimbly over Guy's head, trying to behead the normal jonin as he flipped. The boisterous ninja was still partially prone, but he slapped the blade aside with his bludgeon, and allowed himself to sink partway into the surf, to avoid losing an ear. It is, after a fashion, Kisam explained, since you probably don't know this, I will tell you that this blade was made from a piece of skin, flayed from the 7-finned shark. The same spirit I am, fortunate enough to play host to. That is part of why we fit so well. Guy burst back out of the liquid, whirling his chucks at Kissam's right wrist, trying to disarm the mist rogue. The shark yanked his hand back, and interposed his sword. This time, the rough edge tore through the reinforced chain of Guy's weapon. Hoshigaki shifted the blade slightly and scored another light hit on the leaf shinobi's chest. I have to keep it happy, so I'll contribute something extra, too. The renegade did not sound like that was an imposition. As Guy tumbled past the Jinchuriki, using his momentum to try to buy himself a few seconds, he heard the sound of cloth ripping. As he landed on the water again, he glanced back, and saw a single, curved, triangle of blue energy, emerging from Kissam's back between his shoulder blades. At the same time, the near-human reached out, and tore the remainder of the bandages covering his sword, revealing a thick mass of points under the larger protrusions, and also a vestigial mouth at the tip of the blade. The full power of my Samehada, and my one-tail's form, Kissam told, his voice just slightly more curious than mocking. What's your move? Guy smiled broadly and unzipped his vest. The shark's eyes narrowed, as Guy tossed the garment back to the shore. It hit with a resounding thud, and kicked up a cloud of sand that appeared to accidentally save Ebisu's glasses-wearing student from a blue shozaku, when the dust disrupted the sergeant's field of vision long enough to let the boy escape a slash from the renegade's gladius. Kissam's eyes widened and his pupils narrowed, and he stared at Guy in disbelief. Without taking his eyes from the shark or losing his grin, the leaf warrior removed the bundles from his legs and tossed them onto the beach as well, right next to his vest. They landed with similar booms and disruptions of the ground. You wear training weights on missions? Hoshigaki demanded, incredulously. Body armor and a backup modular weapons set. Guy's teeth twinkled triumphantly, but seeing as how they will do no good against you, I thought I could fight better without them. And since you powered up yourself as well as your equipment, I might as well do the same. I open the first two gates. Guy shouted, Gate of opening. Gate of healing. Guy took one step forward, and then vanished. The next instant, he was on Kissam's other side, firing a right cross at the Jinchuriki's face. Kissam tried to intercept with his sword's pommel, but the instant before his block would have succeeded, the excitable water style, massive water prison jutsu. The water from the lake surged up, forming a 40-foot sphere of liquid centered on Kissam. The former Akatsuki member took a deep breath, as the clean water flowed over his gills, and smiled triumphantly when he saw Guy was trapped inside the sphere with him. He noticed that the self-proclaimed handsome devil had slowed by more than half, due to the thicker material. That will teach him to underestimate the power of a Jinchuriki, Kissam thought, as Guy tried and failed to penetrate the edge of the prison. He felt his muscles unknotting from where Guy had hit him. While it might not have the regenerative powers of the nine tails, the seven fins further accelerated Hoshigaki's healing when they were underwater. I wonder how long you can hold your breath, Kissam asked, his chakra letting him speak and be heard normally while submerged, but you know, I don't really care that much. Suten, Goshokuzame. He felt a small displeasure from Samehada as part of the water thickened and took the forms of 5 tiger sharks. The artificial predators swam towards Guy hungrily. The leaf jonin scowled slightly, and dropped his hands to his sides. He expelled some air, seeming to speak, but unlike Kissam, his words were indistinguishable. But his intent became clear as the water around him began to swirl, and his skin turned a deep red color. The chakra sharks continued forward, having even less understanding of what was happening than their source animals would have. Leaf hot wind, Guy shouted, propelling himself up and forward. He began to spin, and his extended leg caught fire. The water exploded away from him, and he tore apart the jutsu sharks. Guy flipped backwards through the air, exiting Kissam's entrapping technique through the giant divot he created, before the water could fill back in. That's like the technique you used to K my shadow that time, Kissam noted, as he let the water prison lapse. A simpler derivative, Guy noted briefly, before shooting forward again. He is less talkative since opening the gates, the shark man noted. Before Guy could close the distance, Kissam ceased sending chakra out of his feet and dropped into the water. The leaf warrior raised his right foot to drive it into the water, but before he could break the surface. As he landed, Guy noticed his opponent's sword was large and spikier, and a tongue extended from the weapon's mouth. He also noticed that now 2 fins were visible on Kissam, the one on his back and a new protrusion outside his left triceps. I can't match your 3 gates with 1 tail, Kissam noticed his opponent's gaze, but a little more power from Samehada and a second tail should do the trick. The renegade dove into the water again, and Guy tried to track him, but the darkness of the partial cave made up for the clarity of the water, and the shark vanished. Instead, he sent chakra to his wounds to stem the bleeding, and concentrated on the feeling in his feet. He felt the water begin to move under him, and rolled to the side. Unfortunately, he wasn't fast enough, and Samehada tagged his right arm again, only centimeters from the first cut. As he regained his feet, Guy took off towards solid ground. Kisum followed on top of the water, and this time he was able to keep pace with the Leaf Liberator, and even begin to close the gap. He raised his hungry weapon to carve into Guy's back, when he heard a creak in the other Jonan's joints. Suddenly Guy was facing Kisum, and his foot was in Guki's general's throat. Kisum rocketed away, choking. But they were too close to the shore, and he only sunk into the water a few inches. Fourth gate, Guy whispered imperiously, gate of pain. Kisum watched his prey for a moment, taking in the feel of the water through his light clothing. His breathing slowly steadied. He had been one-upping me with the inner gates. He has only 4 gates left, and then he dies, but I can fully control up to 6 tails, plus now that Samehada is happy, it can send me more power. And I have plenty of water at hand. Sutan, shark missile, he intoned without signing, dredging up the lake and throwing a large chunk of it at Guy in the form of a great white. He hopped sideways and then ran forward, hoping to catch the bowl-cut ninja from both sides. Guy simply held his ground, and an instant before the water shark bit into him, he punched it in the nose. The force of the blow, plus the chakra flooding from his body, destroyed the jutsu, and Guy effortlessly slid out of the way of Kisum's first 2 stabs. You shouldn't be able to move like that with that leg, the Jinchuriki told him, as the Leaf Ninja's fist numbed Kisum's whole arm when the renegade blocked a counter punch. Guy only smirked back, and punched again with the same arm. The renegade was too slow to block, and Guy's fist hit a pressure point in his left shoulder. Fine, try this. Kisum focused his chakra again, and the force of his ki pushed Guy back, cutting furrows in the sand. A third fin emerged under the upper part of his right arm, restoring feeling to the limb. But this time the fin was not alone, and an aura of dark blue visible chakra surrounded Kisum. Guy did not hesitate, but as soon as the pressure let up, he charged back in, his fist flying at Kisum's face. This time the rogue did not even attempt to block or evade, he took the blow without flinching, and was not moved by it. Instead, the skin on Guy's knuckles was deeply shredded by the rough texture of the demon shark shroud. Then he spun Samehada up, nearly taking off Guy's arm. The Leaf team leader hopped back, examining his wounded fist and glaring at the Jinchuriki. So, that is the power of a 3 tails level demon cloak. Guy recognized that he still had the slight edge in speed, but if he could not hit Kisum without taking more damage than he inflicted, the normally loud Jonan expected it would be a short fight. Even though his sense of pain was dulled by the 4th gate, Guy could already tell he had inflicted some damage on his own body, and knew he could not keep going like this for too much longer. If I could take away that sword, it would help to even things up, Guy recalled, both in limiting his reach, and by cutting off his second outside supply of chakra. But you tried that last time, and Samehada didn't react too well, Kisum shot back, but please, try it again. No, I think not. Guy shook his head. Instead I will simply say, unlock the 6th gate, gate of view. Skipping one again. Kisum demanded, but he also noticed that the vortex of Guy's energy was pushing the water away from them this time. The Leaf Jonan jumped forward, again faster, and Hoshigaki expected him to attack from behind again with his superior speed. Instead Guy came straight in, and his foot collided with Kisum's chin, launching him towards the leaf cover. Not that, Kisum shouted, as Guy jumped above him, his legs and arms curled in. Morning P. Might, Guy yelled, raining fire-wrapped punches down on Kisum, driving the Jinchuriki back down to the ground. The former missed Jonan managed to position his sword between them again, but the breadth and speed of Guy's attack ensured he was still hit by dozens of scorching punches. However, more blows hit Samehada. Guy landed, flexing his fingers, and Kisum burst from the beach, a second fin on his back, for 4 total. His blue skin was blackened in places, and his breathing was as harsh as his opponent's, but he pointed his sword at Guy, with a confident glare. The Leaf Ninja studied him for a moment, focusing on the demonic blade, and then he grinned. 7th gate, he called out grandiosely, Gate of Wonder. Are you that afraid of my four tails form? Kisum stalked slowly closer to the water. Guy did not answer, but lifted his open right hand before his face. He tapped the back with the first two fingers on his left hand, and as the chakra was transferred, his right curled into a partial fist. He rapidly turned his hand towards Kisum, and thrust at him. His fingers superficially resembled the roaring mouth of a big cat, and the energy that exploded out bore an even greater likeness to its namesake. Daytime tiger. His roar was partially drowned by the growl of the giant tiger head that shot towards Hoshigaki, creating a visible ripple in the air. It was too large, too fast for the shark to dodge, and so he brought up his sword again. But the whispers from the blade that he had been suppressing told him two things. The first was that there was none of Guy's chakra in the attack. He realized it was just a supersonic blast of hyper-compressed air. And the second impression he received from Samehada was a whimper of pain. His eyes dropped, and he saw what had made Guy smile. The tooth-like scales of the demon shark sword were burned and chipped. Like the incoming attack, the last technique had not directly used Guy's chakra, the heat was from friction, and the force was from his muscles. So Samehada had not been able to absorb the attack like it would have a ninjutsu. Kisum had enough time to agonize over the choice, but not enough time to act. The daytime tiger hit Samehada and exploded, separating the blade from its owner with the force of the unraveling air mass. As he tumbled back, Kisum watched incredulously as the demonic blade snapped in half, and then broke apart 3 more times. The remains of the shark skin sword scattered on the sand. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.